about it the most is the dream sequence and how the dream sequence ends. And then we get the payoff of seeing the rest of it later on in the film. Right?
Well, I think it undercuts the dream sequence to see it earlier. Like if that like with you, Brandon, if there's one scene I definitely would take out, it would be this Kyle Reese flashback.
Yeah, I would take this one out completely.
Because you hear it, the theatrical cut works so perfectly because you hear about her dream. She's telling Silverman about it, and then eventually later on you get to see it. But at that point you'd already seen it, and then she talks about it, and you see it again. So that one should go.
See, the other one that I think should definitely go is when he kills the dog. Right.
I mean, I hate to see dogs die on screen, definitely, but
it's not because of that. Like, to me, it's like the T-1000's smart enough that he could clue in that, okay, the guy, he kills the foster father because of the dog, because he doesn't want anything to tip him off. And then as soon as the voice asks, how's Wolfie doing? You don't even need to know. He knows why he just got hung up on. He can figure that out. So to have him go out and be like, well, why did I just get hung up on? I better go and look and see if it was the dog. Oh, darn, it was the wrong name. I don't know. Like, to me, that's just a waste of time, and that scene should be out, too.
Well, I like seeing more of the T-1000, because if there is one weaker part of the movie, it's because the T-1000 disappears for, like, literally, and I looked at the counter, like, for 45 minutes almost. Yes. The T-1000 is not in the film. And, side note, there was actually, they never filmed this to my understanding, but there was an idea of like a subplot with him, like following the leads of Sarah Connor's contacts, going to where they were in Mexico and getting some leads there just to give him something to do. But they eventually cut it for that very reason. It was just giving him something to do.
But it's not necessary to.
No.
It's fine that he's gone for that long in the movie.
Right. But, little scene with killing the dog, it's like, okay, they gave him something else. Something else to see him. Now, there is a deleted scene that's in no version of this at all. It's not even in that secret code cut that you entered, and it's the T-1000 searching John Connor's room. This is a true deleted scene. It's never been reincorporated anywhere. And have you seen this deleted scene, by the way?
It might be in that extended one because there's actually 2 scenes in that movie. There's 2 extra scenes in that one. Okay. But again, I've only seen it once, and that was when I first bought the DVD whenever it came out. So that actually might be in there. What does he do in the room? So
he goes to John's room, and he uses his fingers like to kind of like trace the wall and everything, and it's to show how he's a tactile creature. Yeah. So it's an interesting idea. And then what I love about the scene is he finds the box of tapes that Sarah had left John. That had been leaving it that we saw her starting to record in the Terminator. So I thought that was a cool thing. Again, wanting to see the T-1000, have more to do. So anyway, doesn't matter that it's gone, but it's cool stuff to see. And then ultimately, I think everything else is really just bits and pieces, other than the scene where John tries to get the T-800 to smile, and that it's funny. And it does inform the scene later when they're in the weapons locker, or and he pulls out that giant gun and he smiles. And that's like, this is kind of out of character, but you can see like John had encouraged him to start doing that kind of thing. So, and I think that pretty much covers all the extended material. We talked a lot already about the T-1000 glitching after he was frozen and reassembled, and I like that. Like you have it's like, oh, maybe what they did actually mattered. It's affecting this unstoppable machine, and that was the idea of Cameron incorporating that to begin with. Like, oh, maybe they have a chance against this thing after all. But yeah, on the whole, I'll probably always go back to the extended cut because I like all the scenes, and but it's just interesting to see like the power of editing and how you can take like that's a handful of extended scenes with a lot of stuff going on, and you could take them all out and the film still works. Yeah,
you got it. Yeah, okay, so this movie is an absolute masterpiece, and what I love about it is I love the opening sequence, and I wonder if it would have been better. No, I can't remember. It's been so long since I saw it the first time. Right, I was 11 or 12 when I first saw this because I saw it shortly after it came out on home video, and having had seen Terminator 1 and then seeing this, and maybe not knowing at the beginning that Arnold was good. Mm-hmm. I think that would have been really nice to see. But again, we've both said last episode that Terminator 2 was the one that we saw first.
Right.
And I'd seen this so many times that it's like, wow, like I can't even picture this movie not knowing this movie because I've just seen it so many times and I know it so well. And so going back and seeing Terminator 1 the first time, it's like, wow, they've really copied a lot of stuff from the first Terminator, which is really kind of fascinating. And, you know, I think of George Lucas when I think about the copying in this. It's rhymes.
Like poetry. It rhymes.
It's like poetry. But it works better in this movie than it does in the Star Wars universe for me. Like, it makes more sense because of the time loop.
Yes.
Right? Things would happen over and over in a time loop. The things that they say, you know, like Sarah Connor yelling at the screen and they pause it. That's how Kyle Reese's video was. You know, like the semi-truck that the T-1000 gets in is the toy. Arnold Schwarzenegger drove over that toy in the first one with his car, you know, when he comes to a stop. Like, all of this stuff, you know, it works so well for me in this movie. How does this type of rhyming and symmetry work for you?
Well, it's almost
lines,
in its own way.
Even actual lines are said again.
Yeah, come with me if you want to live.
Yeah.
Get out. You know.
Get out.
In a way, it's like a big budget remake, but also a sequel of the Terminator, right? It's like finally he has the budget to do all the things he wanted to do. Literally, like he wanted to have a liquid Terminator, do all these crazy things in the first Terminator, and he finally has the budget to do it all. So that is definitely informing why you see a lot of the same things again, just on a grander scale. But also, I think these are machines sent back in time, and they're playing on the reverse of what you saw in the first one. And to get back to your point about not knowing it was Arnold, right? I mean, like the promotional campaign of this movie, when it first started, they didn't have any shots of, you know, Arnold and, you know, Sarah Connor and John Connor all together because they wanted to kind of preserve that secret. But then when the trailer comes out, it's like, before his mission was to terminate, but now it's to protect. And it's like, oh, well, thanks for just blowing that, undercutting all that. Because if you watch the movie, like if you just on its own, clearly this movie was written with the idea of you will not know who is the good Terminator and who is the bad one. Because at the beginning, you know, the Sarah Connor's voiceover, she said, like before, they sent a protector and a Terminator. So you're like, oh, is Robert Patrick now the human they send back in time to protect John? Because you don't see him as a Terminator. You don't see him arrive, right? Because you saw Kyle Reese, he was all hurt when he arrived because the time travel, again, was painful. But Arnold was all cool when he got up. Same way this time, right? Kyle Reese, I'm already in a loop here. But Robert Patrick, the T-1000, when he shows up, he doesn't kill anybody. He just kind of knocks out the cop. So you're like, oh, okay, that could still be a human. Cop. You know, he gave him hit him to the back of the head with a gun or something. You don't know what he did. He
killed him the same way he killed that semi-driver at the end.
Oh, you're right, because he kind of punches him, right? Okay. Yeah. But you don't see that. You don't see there's a spike in his back, right? You're like, maybe he just knocked the guy out. You're right there. And then, you know, as they're converging, right, like, you know, that there's...
he's wearing a cop outfit, which is the outfit of a protector.
Right, exactly. And then Ben Arnold is the bar, you know, just the same stuff, in a leather jacket, steals a gun, that kind of stuff. So he looks like a bad guy. But then when you get down to that... And this is like almost an hour into the movie when the Terminators finally converge in that hallway in the mall. I think it's like 30 minutes in, actually. I think it's like a good 30 minutes in, excuse me. And you don't know because... John runs in there. Arnold comes out. He points the gun at him, and John's like, "Oh no!" And then he says, "Get down!" And then he shoots the T-1000, and that's when you know, narratively, watching the film, that Arnold's the good guy here. But I get why they had to promote it that way because it's like a cool twist. Because what could they possibly show in the trailer at the first 30 minutes and nothing else if they try to preserve that secret?
I don't know. Yeah, it would have been tough to do because so much of the movie is them together. But I think they could have shown a lot of stuff like, you know, him shooting up the cops at the end, right, in the Cyberdyne building. They could have shown him, you know, I don't know. There's lots of stuff they could have shown that I think they probably could have worked around it if they just tried hard enough.
Right. Well, anyway. They didn't sink the movie or anything, but it's interesting that clearly that narratively, like, they had an idea in mind of, like, we're going to preserve this, you know. But when the marketing, it did what it did, and compared to what they did in the other Terminator movies, marketing and spoiling things, not even a shadow of what they did there. Right. So, but hey, let's talk about John Connor. He's a new character. What did you think of incorporating him as a kid in this movie?
I think it's brilliant. Again, this makes total sense where they're like, okay, we tried this mission and failed. What's next? Let's just kill John Connor when he's young because he's vulnerable because he's just a kid. Like, had they not been able to send the Terminator Schwarzenegger back in time, he would have been dead. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's a brilliant second mission. It's the computer program recalculating and coming up with a new solution. It makes absolute perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say this, we talked about how the first Terminator was a perfect time loop, right? Predestination paradox. This one, it's like, you talk about unnecessary sequels, right? This is an unnecessary sequel. Everything was a perfect loop. Everything was decided and set and done in the first movie. But they found a loophole here, and they exploited it. And that's what we're talking about with franchise, this whole thing, right? Like, this whole podcast, the idea is like you can even though a great movie is great on its own, you can find ways to make great sequels.
Right.
And there was no hanging thread about this in the first Terminator film. Like we talked about at the end of that podcast. Well, naturally, if they ever did a sequel, it would be the Future War, right? But that's not what they did. They did the plot of the Terminator again with different stakes and different characters and different dynamics, and that's what makes it fresh. And I guess if you thinking in universe, Brandon, right? I've tried to justify all this, right? All right, so Skynet gets defeated. So they have the T-800s. They send that one back, and then as a backup plan, they have this advanced prototype. Like, well, let's send that back too. So in my mind, and in the way it was in the script, and then also the novelization, right? These were all sent back almost simultaneously, mm-hmm. And that's the way it had to be done. So, and to me, that makes sense. Now, that's it though. Like you start stretching it past this, you really stretches you really got to suspend your disbelief. Like how many last ditch Terminators did they have to send back in time, right? But like I will allow this movie is so good and it's so smart that I'm like, all right, I'm going to give you this one because you did a great job with it, but don't be doing this again.
Right, because like if you sit down and think of it, having them be back to back doesn't make any sense because then the humans, it doesn't make any sense that they would send a human being and then send the Terminator because to me that doesn't make any sense if you sit down and think about it, right? Because if they find out about the plan that Skynet is going to do to send back a Terminator, so they've got to scramble to come up with a solution, so they send Kyle Reese back. Now we know, like because of the time loop, he knows who he's going to send back, but then how do they know to send the Terminator back?
The idea is like they would find like another chamber and like, oh look, this one just sent back something else, right? And he would know as a kid, right? Old John Connor would know that there was a second Terminator that was sent back to kill him. So, I have to also send this Arnold, and it's the last one on the row here, the 101 model. So it's like, okay, I got to send this second guy too, and then we're good. That would complete the loop in my
okay, that makes sense. But I had trouble with that because, again, I don't think that there's a time loop because time is linear. So that's why I have trouble getting my head around that idea.
Well, yes, this is where the rules of time travel change, though, starting with this one, because the no fate but what you make, we're going to stop the future, right? Okay, well, they stopped Judgment Day here, but then, of course, where do these Terminators come from then? Where do Kyle Reese come from if Judgment Day never happens, right? So then you're talking about, like, branching off timelines and all kinds of crazy stuff. So I think it really was wise to leave things the way they did with, like, the unknown future. Because, like, at the end of the movie, you're like, did they stop it? Did they not? We don't know.
Right.
Right? And so you can kind of, like, put your own headcanon, right, is the terms we use in fandom, right? Put your own headcanon into what happens in these two movies, and then you're good to go. That's the way I see it with this one. But this one definitely kind of branches off that predestination paradox time loop we were talking about in the first movie.
What you just said to me helps me with the title of the new film.
Oh, because that's the dark fate. That's the darkest timeline.
No, right? The dark fate is that in this one, it's no fate, but what you make for yourself. But dark fate is that it's like a fate that they can never escape, is Judgment Day, right? Because, like, without spoiling, like, I don't know, maybe we should hold that for the next one, but they've got an explanation for that in Terminator 3 with what happens with Judgment Day. Which, you're right, but the dark fate is that they can never escape Judgment Day.
Well,
it's just delayed or whatever, right? So
why is this film called Judgment Day, Brandon? Because, again, not to spoil things, but Terminator 3 would be a much more appropriate movie to be called Judgment Day, right?
Yes, it would. But, again, they didn't know there was going to be a Terminator 3 at the time.
Right. Well,
it was quite a while until Terminator 3 came out, right?
Yeah, it was way later on down the road. But, so we went on our whole time loop. I know we were going to have that conversation when we come to this movie, but let's get back to kind of what I asked you earlier about John Connor. Like, what do you think of Edward Furlong as a child actor in this role? I think he